In the unforgiving mountains of northern Mexico, where violence echoes through ancient canyons like thunder, a retired Marine's peaceful ranch life is about to explode into chaos. James "Iron Jim" Reynolds sought nothing but solitude among his cattle and horses, trying to forget his decorated past as a force recon Marine K-9 handler. But when the notorious Azteca cartel makes the fatal mistake of raiding his livestock, they have no idea they've just awakened a sleeping warrior. What they saw as an easy target, a remote ranch with a lone guard dog, was actually home to Razor, one of the Marine Corps' most lethal tracking K-9s, with over 150 successful combat missions across 3 continents. Now Reynolds and Razor will unleash decades of tactical experience and hunting expertise to dismantle the cartel's operations piece by piece. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rugged terrain of Reynolds' ranch as he stood on his weathered porch, steaming, coffee in his scarred hands. His eyes methodically scanned the surrounding mountains, an ingrained habit from years of combat operations. Razor, his Belgian Malinois, lay at attention by his feet, the dog's muscled form coiled and ready despite his age. In the corral below, his prized Andalusian horses grazed peacefully, their coats gleaming in the early light. "Another quiet morning, eh, boy?" Reynolds murmured to Razor, whose ears constantly swiveled, tracking every sound in the vast landscape. Their bond, forged through 3 combat tours and countless missions, went beyond mere handler and dog. They were brothers in arms, survivors who'd found peace in these remote mountains. The sudden change in Razor's posture caught Reynolds' attention. The Malinois' ears locked forward, his body tensing as he focused on the western ridge. Years of working together had taught Reynolds to trust his dog's instincts implicitly. Through his binoculars, he spotted movement among the rocks, 2 figures quickly ducking out of sight. "Go check it out," Reynolds commanded softly. Razor moved like a shadow, his training evident in every silent step. The dog disappeared into the scrub brush while Reynolds maintained his casual posture, appearing unaware. Through his scope, he watched Razor flush out 3 men from their hiding spot, sending them scrambling down the ridge, abandoning sophisticated surveillance equipment. "Cartel scouts," Reynolds muttered, recognizing their tactical gear. It was the 4th time this month. The Azteca cartel had been pushing north, absorbing territory through violence and intimidation. His ranch sat on a crucial smuggling route through the mountains, making it a prime target. 50 miles south, in a heavily fortified compound near Ciudad Victoria, Marco Ramirez slammed his fist on an ornate desk. The leader of the Azteca cartel's northern operations glared at his intelligence chief, Diego Suarez. "That's the 3rd reconnaissance team this month. How does one gringo rancher keep detecting our scouts?" Suarez shifted uncomfortably, aware of his boss's legendary temper. "The dog, senor. Some kind of military-trained mutt. Our men can't get close without being detected." "Tell me about this rancher," Ramirez demanded, pouring himself a glass of expensive tequila. His compound, a sprawling estate protected by state-of-the-art security and dozens of heavily armed guards, reflected the cartel's immense wealth and power. James Reynolds, former U.S. Marine, bought the ranch 5 years ago, keeps to himself, raises horses, nothing special. Suarez paused, then added, "Except for the dog. Belgian Malinois, always with him. The animal's detection capabilities are unusual." Carlos Ortiz, Ramirez's head of security, stepped forward from the shadows. "With respect, Jefe, that location is crucial for our new routes. The Americans are squeezing our coastal operations. We need those mountain passes." Ramirez studied a detailed map of the region, his finger tracing the routes through Reynolds' property. Then we send a message. Take his precious horses. Show him what happens when someone interferes with Azteca business. Back at the ranch, Reynolds was repairing fencing with Razor keeping watch when Miguel Herrera, his closest neighbor, pulled up in his battered truck. The old Mexican rancher had become a trusted friend, one of the few people Reynolds let into his life. "James, mi amigo," Miguel called out, his weathered face grave. "Bad news from town. Aztecas moving north, taking ranches. 3 families disappeared last week. They say it was quick, violent, no witnesses." Reynolds nodded, his expression unchanged, but his mind already calculating angles, approaches, defensive positions. "Appreciate the warning, Miguel. How are Maria and the kids?" "Safe, for now. We sent them to relatives in Texas." Miguel hesitated, then added, "Be careful, amigo. These aren't ordinary bandits. They're animals with military-grade weapons and no conscience." After Miguel left, Reynolds knelt beside Razor, running his hand through the dog's thick fur. "What do you think, boy? Ready to come out of retirement if we need to?" The Malinois' intense amber eyes met his, that same focused determination that had kept them alive through countless missions still burning bright. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Reynolds watched his horses through his night vision scope. Razor sat at attention nearby, both of them alert to something in the gathering darkness that others might miss. In the shadows of the surrounding peaks, Xavier Torres and his team of Azteca enforcers were already moving into position. "Remember," Torres whispered to his men, checking his modified M4 carbine, "we take the horses alive. The boss wants to send a message." His team, 12 experienced cartel soldiers with military-grade equipment, had conducted dozens of similar operations. One old Marine and his dog shouldn't pose any real threat. Inside the ranch house, Reynolds was cleaning his boots when Razor's ears suddenly pricked forward. The dog moved silently to the window, muscles coiled. Something was wrong. Both man and dog could feel it in their bones. Reynolds' hand instinctively moved to where his service weapon used to rest, then stopped. Instead, he reached for something else, something he'd hoped to never need again. In the barn, Torres' men were preparing to breach when one of them spotted movement. "Contact!" he whispered urgently. "The dog's loose!" But Razor wasn't just loose, he was hunting. Years of combat training kicked in as the Malinois moved like a ghost through the darkness. The cartel soldiers, despite their equipment and numbers, were about to learn why some dogs and some men should never be underestimated. The first sign that something was wrong came when 2 of Torres' men failed to check in. Then another went silent. In the command center, Ramirez watched through live satellite feed as his operation began to unravel. "Find them," he ordered, but the infrared signatures of his men were disappearing one by one. Reynolds moved through the darkness with practiced efficiency, Razor working in perfect sync with his handler. They had done this hundreds of times before, just never on his own property. The cartel had made their first move, and now they were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. "Sir," Suarez reported nervously, "we've lost contact with Torres' entire team. No gunfire, no explosions, just silence." Ramirez stared at the satellite feed, watching the last heat signatures of his men vanish into the mountain night. For the first time in years, he felt something he'd almost forgotten: fear. What kind of rancher could take down 12 armed men without firing a shot? As dawn approached, Reynolds stood on his porch again, Razor at his side. His horses grazed, peacefully in their corral, undisturbed. In the distance, sirens approached. Someone had finally called the authorities, but by then, Torres and his men were already secured in Reynolds' old barn, disarmed and zip-tied, their military-grade equipment confiscated. The cartel had made their first move, and in doing so, they'd made a crucial mistake. They thought they were dealing with a simple rancher. Instead, they'd just started a war with one of the most lethal K-9 teams in Marine Corps history. Reynolds scratched Razor. Behind the ears, both of them watching the sunrise. The real battle was just beginning. Reynolds moved through the darkness of his barn with practiced precision, Razor gliding silently beside him. The Belgian Malinois' training kicked in automatically. No barking, no unnecessary movement. They had conducted countless operations like this before, just never to protect horses instead of hunting insurgents. Track, Reynolds whispered, holding out a piece of fabric from one of Torres' men. Razor's nostrils flared, taking in the scent. 20 years of military operations had taught them both that the first hours after an attack were crucial. The trail led them to the western ridge, where they found fresh tire tracks and discarded cigarette butts. Amateur mistakes that made Reynolds shake his head. These weren't professionals, at least not by his standards. What do you think, boy? 5, maybe 6 vehicles? Razor's ears twitched in agreement. Reynolds had learned to read the dog signals like a book during their time. In Force Recon, a vehicle approached, lights off. Both man and dog melted into the shadows as Sheriff Ana Martinez stepped out of her patrol car, flashlight sweeping the area. "Bit late for a walk, James," Ana called out, her hand resting casually near her sidearm. She'd been sheriff of Sierra County for 15 years and had never quite figured out her mysterious neighbor. Reynolds emerged from the darkness. "They tried to take my horses, made a mess of it." Anna's flashlight found the tire tracks. "Azteca getting sloppy, aren't they?" She studied Reynolds' face in the beam. "You're taking this awfully calm for someone who just fought off a cartel hit team." "Panic never solved anything, Sheriff." Reynolds' voice was steady, but his eyes were hard. "Besides, they have no idea what they just started." Razor's sudden alertness caught both their attention. The dog's head turned toward the mountain road, ears forward. "More company?" Anna asked, drawing her weapon. "No," Reynolds replied, listening intently. "That's Miguel's truck. Suspension's shot on the right rear." Moments later, his neighbor's battered pickup appeared, driving fast with lights off. "James," Miguel called out urgently, "just heard from Pablo at the gas station. 3 black SUVs heading south towards Ciudad Victoria, driving like devils were chasing them." Ana grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Sheriff Martinez. Need eyes on any vehicles heading south towards Ciudad Victoria in the last hour." The radio crackled with confirmation. 3 vehicles matching the description had been spotted crossing at the old mountain pass. In his compound, Marco Ramirez was questioning a battered Xavier Torres while Diego Suarez watched nervously. "How does one old Marine and a dog take down 12 armed men?" Ramirez's voice was dangerously calm. "It wasn't normal," Torres managed, his face bruised. "The dog, it moved like a ghost. And the Marine. He knew exactly where we were, every move before we made it." Ramirez studied a satellite image of Reynolds' ranch. "Something feels wrong. This was too easy." Carlos Ortiz, his security chief, agreed. "I've seen operations like this before. The quiet ones, the ones who don't make noise when they're hit, they're the dangerous ones." "Find out everything about him," Ramirez ordered. "I want to know who this gringo really is." Back at the ranch, Reynolds was in his study, pulling out a locked case he hadn't opened in years. Inside lay encrypted phones, tactical gear, and detailed maps of the border region. Razor watched as his handler laid out satellite images of Ciudad Victoria. "Getting comfortable, letting our guard down," Reynolds muttered to himself and Razor. "That stops now." Anna stepped into the study, whistling at the equipment. "Want to tell me what a horse rancher is doing with military-grade tactical gear? Would you believe I'm an enthusiastic collector?" Reynolds' attempted humor didn't reach his eyes. "Cut the act, James. I served too, 75th Ranger Regiment. I know Spec Ops gear when I see it." Anna crossed her arms. "Who are you, really?" "Reynolds. Was quiet for a moment, then Force Recon, Marine Special Operations Command. Razor and I did 20 years, most of it classified. We were part of a specialized K9 unit focusing on high-value target tracking and interdiction. Jesus, Anna muttered. The cartel has no idea who they're dealing with, do they? No, Reynolds replied, checking a satellite phone. And I'd like to keep it that way as long as possible. Element of surprise and all that. Their conversation was interrupted by Razor's low growl. The Malinois was staring intently at the window. Outside, a car door slammed. Anna drew her weapon, but Reynolds held up his hand. Stand down. Razor would be a lot more aggressive if it was a threat. Agent Sophia Reyes of the DEA stepped onto the porch, badge already out. Sheriff Martinez, Mr. Reynolds. We need to talk about the Azteca cartel. Perfect timing, Reynolds said, turning back to his maps. You can help us with something. Actually, Sophia replied, I'm here about more than just tonight's incident. Azteca isn't just stealing livestock anymore. They're taking over ranches. All along the border, building an empire. Your property sits right in the middle of their primary smuggling route. So the horses were just the beginning, Anna concluded. They're testing you, Mr. Reynolds, Sophia explained. If you don't respond, they'll take everything. Reynolds shared a look with Razor. Oh, I'll respond. Just not the way they're expecting. In Ciudad Victoria, Diego Suarez was briefing Ramirez on his findings. Sir, we have a problem. Reynolds isn't just any Marine. He and that dog were part of something called Task Force Shadow, a classified K9 unit specializing in cartel interdiction. They have over 150 confirmed operations against cartels in Colombia and Mexico. Ramirez studied a grainy photograph of Reynolds and Razor in combat gear. Why didn't we know this before? Their records were buried deep. Someone wanted their background hidden. Suarez hesitated. The dog, Razor, he's not just a guard dog. He's one of their most decorated combat canines, multiple awards for valor in combat. Carlos Ortiz shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should have checked his background first. Maybe you should have, a cold voice interrupted. Salvador Luna, head of the entire Azteca cartel, stepped into the room. Marco, your sloppiness is becoming a problem. One Marine and his dog have made us look weak. Back at the ranch, Reynolds was gearing up. The tactical vest felt familiar against his chest, like greeting an old friend. Razor sat patiently as Reynolds checked his specialized K9 tactical vest, something that had saved both their lives more than once. I know what you're thinking, Reynolds said to Anna and Sophia, who were studying his maps with growing concern. This seems like overkill for a failed livestock raid. Actually, Sophia replied, examining the cartel compound's layout, I'm thinking Azteca just made the biggest mistake of their lives. You have no idea, Reynolds said softly, attaching Razor's infrared identification beacon. Ready to go to work, boy? The Malinois posture changed instantly, transforming from a calm ranch dog into the elite military K9 he'd always been. Ina checked her weapon. What's the first move? We gather intel. Razor and I will do some recon tonight. No strikes yet, just information gathering. Azteca has no idea we're coming, and I intend to keep it that way as long as possible. As night fell over the mountains, Reynolds and Razor prepared for their first covert operation in years. The game had changed, but the players had no idea who they were really dealing with. The attack on his ranch wasn't just a crime, it was the beginning of a war. The cartel thought they were dealing with a simple rancher. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The desert night embraced Reynolds and Razor like an old friend, their movements silent across the rugged terrain. The lights of Ciudad Victoria flickered in the distance, but their target lay on the outskirts, the Azteca compound where Salvador Luna had gathered his leadership. Razor froze, nose twitching. Reynolds instantly dropped to a crouch, years of training taking over. A patrol vehicle passed on the dirt road below. its occupants unaware of the two shadows observing from the ridge. "Just like old times, boy," Reynolds whispered. Razor's ears flicked in response, but his focus remained unwavering. Through his night vision goggles, Reynolds studied the compound's layout. 4 main buildings, guard towers at each corner, and a series of smaller structures behind the main complex. The security was substantial, but nothing compared to what they'd faced in Afghanistan or Colombia. He noted guard rotations, camera positions, and blind spots. Razor's ears suddenly perked up at approaching vehicles. 3 SUVs entered, the compound riding low on their suspensions. "That's not drugs," Reynolds muttered, noting how the vehicles moved. "Weapons shipment." The gates opened, and he watched as crates were unloaded, his trained eye recognizing the shapes, high-powered rifles, likely military grade. At the sheriff's office, Ana Martinez was burning the midnight oil when Agent Sofia Reyes arrived with coffee. "Any word from Reynolds?" Sofia asked. "Radio silence as planned," Ana replied, spreading out several surveillance photos. "But I've got something else. These were taken at other ranches Azteca has seized. Look familiar?" Sofia studied the images. "They're building a network, using the ranches as staging points for something big." She paused. "The horses were just the trigger. They were always going to move on Reynolds' ranch. The question is," Ana mused, "did they pick the wrong target by accident, or did someone want them to?" The compound security was good, but Reynolds had seen better. Razor lay beside him as he sketched the layout, marking patrol patterns and camera coverage. The Malinois' ears suddenly perked up. "What is it, boy?" Reynolds whispered. Razor's training kicked in. A subtle head tilt toward movement in the brush behind them. Reynolds didn't move, didn't even breathe differently. "Friend or foe?" he whispered. Razor's tail tapped once. "Friend. You're a hard man to track, Captain Reynolds," Captain Manuel Ortega said softly, crawling up beside them. The Mexican Marine Special Forces officer kept his voice low. "Agent Reyes said I might find you here." "Doing a little bird watching," Reynolds replied dryly. "Those are some interesting birds." Ortega nodded toward the compound. "We've been trying to get eyes inside that place for months." He paused. "You have them. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Officially, nothing yet. We need probable cause for a raid." Reynolds studied the compound through his scope. "Unofficially, I've got some ideas." Below them, voices carried from the compound. Through his directional microphone, Reynolds listened as Marco Ramirez addressed his security team. "Luna wants results. The Marine made us look weak. We hit his ranch again, but this time we take everything." "With respect," Diego Suarez interrupted, "something feels wrong. The quiet ones, the ones who don't panic when we hit them, they're the dangerous ones." In the compound, Carlos Ortiz agreed. "I've seen operators like this before. He's playing us, waiting for us to make a mistake." "All units in position," Ana's voice came through the radio. "Federal response teams standing by," Sofia confirmed. "My men are ready," Ortega added. Reynolds checked his watch as the first rays of sun painted the mountains gold. The cartel had brought overwhelming force to guarantee victory. Instead, they just made his job easier. When you gather all your enemies in one place, you only have to spring one trap. The morning sun revealed Luna's forces approaching from 3 directions, their vehicles kicking up dust clouds across the mountain terrain. Reynolds watched through his tactical scope, while Razor maintained his vigilant position. Through their mesh radio network, Ana's voice crackled. 3 mechanized columns, just like you predicted. "Their first mistake," Reynolds replied softly. "They're following standard cartel assault doctrine. Predictable." Below him, more than 100 armed men prepared to assault what they thought was an unprepared ranch. Salvador Luna observed the operation through live drone feeds from his command. "Center, full perimeter breach," he ordered. "I want that ranch secured in under 10 minutes." Marco Ramirez led the primary assault force, his military experience evident in their formation. "Compound looks clear," he reported, scanning the apparently deserted ranch. "No defensive positions, no resistance visible." "Too clear," Carlos Ortiz muttered, his instincts screaming warnings. "This feels wrong." First phase, Reynolds' voice came through their secure network. "Let them think they're in control." Underground, in a reinforced command bunker he'd prepared years ago, Reynolds monitored the cartel's movements through a sophisticated camera system. Sophia and Anna watched as the cartel forces spread out across the property. "They're bringing in heavy weapons," Sophia reported. "RPGs, belt-fed machine guns, even some military-grade combat vehicles." "Perfect," Reynolds replied. "The more hardware they commit, the harder it'll be for them to withdraw when things go wrong." Razor's ears suddenly perked up, a signal Reynolds knew well. Through the camera network, they watched as Luna himself arrived in an armored SUV, surrounded by elite guards. "He came personally," Anna observed. "Wasn't expecting that." "Pride," Reynolds explained. "After our earlier encounters, he needs to oversee this himself." Another predictable move, Razor's subtle barking pattern transmitted through their network. 3 short, 2 long. Years of combat operations had turned their signals into a precise language. "Heavy weapons being positioned," Reynolds translated. "They're setting up for a sweep." Ramirez directed his forces with practiced precision. "First team, secure the main house. Second team, sweep the stables. Third team, clear the outlying buildings." Cartel soldiers moved through the property, weapons ready, finding every building apparently abandoned. "No resistance," one team leader reported. "Place looks deserted." In the command bunker, Reynolds watched the cartel forces spread through his prepared battlefield. Razor maintained his position, coordinating with their hidden assets through signals they'd perfected over years of combat operations. "They're inside the primary target zone," Ortega reported from his concealed position. "Hold positions," Reynolds ordered. "Let them commit fully." Above ground, Luna emerged from his vehicle, surveying what he believed was his victory. "See? He ran, just like all the others." "All units in position," Anna's voice came through the radio. "Federal response team standing by," Sophia confirmed. "My men are ready," Ortega added. Reynolds checked his watch as the first rays of sun painted the mountains gold. The cartel had brought overwhelming force to guarantee victory. Instead, they'd just made his job easier. When you gather all your enemies in one place, you only have to spring one trap. The morning sun revealed Luna's forces approaching from 3 directions, their vehicles kicking up dust clouds across the mountain terrain. Reynolds watched through his tactical scope while Razor maintained his vigilant position. Through their mesh radio network, Anna's voice crackled. 3 mechanized columns, just like you predicted." "Their first mistake," Reynolds replied softly. "They're following standard cartel assault doctrine. Predictable." Below him, more than 100 armed men prepared to assault what they thought was an unprepared ranch. Salvador Luna observed the operation through live drone feeds from his command. "Center, full perimeter breach," he ordered. "I want that ranch secured in under 10 minutes." Marco Ramirez led the primary assault force, his military experience evident in their formation. "Compound looks clear," he reported, scanning the apparently deserted ranch. "No defensive positions, no resistance visible." "Too clear," Carlos Ortiz muttered, his instincts screaming warnings. "This feels wrong." First phase, Reynolds' voice came through their secure network. "Let them think they're in control." Underground, in a reinforced command bunker he'd prepared years ago, Reynolds monitored the cartel's movements through a sophisticated camera system. Sophia and Anna watched as the cartel forces spread out across the property. "They're bringing in heavy weapons," Sophia reported. "RPGs, belt-fed machine guns, even some military-grade combat vehicles." Perfect, Reynolds replied. The more hardware they commit, the harder it'll be for them to withdraw when things go wrong. Razor's ears suddenly perked up. A signal Reynolds knew well. Through the camera network, they watched as Luna himself arrived in an armored SUV, surrounded by elite guards. He came personally, Anna observed. Wasn't expecting that. Pride, Reynolds explained. After our earlier encounters, he needs to oversee this himself. Another predictable move. Razor's subtle barking pattern transmitted through their network. 3 short, 2 long. Years of combat operations had turned their signals into a precise language. Heavy weapons being positioned, Reynolds translated. They're setting up for a sweep. Ramirez directed his forces with practiced precision. First team secure the main house. Second team sweep the stables. Third team clear the outlying buildings. Cartel soldiers moved through the property. Weapons ready, finding every building apparently abandoned. No resistance, one team leader reported. Place looks deserted. In the command bunker, Reynolds watched the cartel forces spread through his prepared battlefield. Razor maintained his position, coordinating with their hidden assets through signals they'd perfected over years of combat operations. They're inside the primary target zone, Ortega reported from his concealed position. Hold positions, Reynolds ordered. Let them commit fully. Above ground, Luna emerged from his vehicle, surveying what he believed was his victory. See, he ran, just like all the others. Sir, Ramirez interrupted, I recommend we sweep for booby traps before the first phase of Reynolds' trap activated. Throughout the property, carefully prepared charges detonated, not to kill but to disable. Vehicle tires shredded on hidden spike strips. Communication jammers activated, disrupting the cartel's tactical network. Ambush! Ramirez shouted, but his training betrayed him. He ordered his men to standard defensive positions, exactly the positions Reynolds had prepared for. Second phase, Reynolds commanded. Razor relayed the signal through their network. The ranch seemed to come alive. Hidden panels opened in buildings. Concealed firing positions revealed themselves. The cartel forces suddenly found themselves exposed, their tactical advantage evaporating. Where are they? Luna demanded, as shots rang out from seemingly everywhere. Find them! But Reynolds' prepared positions weren't static, like the combat operations they'd run in the mountains of Afghanistan. Every position had multiple fallback points. Every angle was covered. Every route of retreat had been anticipated. East sector blocked, Anna reported. Their local deputies, positioned perfectly, prevented any escape in that direction. West sector contained, Sophia added. Federal agents had sealed off the mountain passes. Reynolds' voice came through the cartel's compromised radio network. Did you really think I'd abandon my home, Mr. Luna? That I'd run from thugs with expensive toys? Find him, Luna screamed. Find him now. But Reynolds was everywhere and nowhere, Razor's coordinated movements allowing them to strike from multiple positions, keeping the cartel forces off balance. Ramirez watched his tactical advantage dissolve. This isn't cartel resistance, he told Luna. This is a prepared military operation. We need to withdraw. No! Luna's face contorted with rage. I will not be humiliated by one Marine and his dog. Sir, we're losing vehicles. Communications are down. We're fighting blind. Underground, Reynolds directed the defense with calculated precision. Razor's intelligence network provided real-time updates on cartel movements, allowing them to stay. One step ahead, they're clustering near the stables, Ortega reported. Looks like they're trying to establish a command post. Just as expected, Reynolds replied. Time for Phase 3. Razor's ears perked up at the command. The Belgian Malinois coordinated their hidden teams with precise signals, emerging at carefully chosen points before disappearing again. Above ground, the cartel forces found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see or predict. Every building they thought secure became a trap. Every defensive position they established became vulnerable. "This is impossible," Ramirez muttered, watching another vehicle disabled by hidden defenses. "The entire ranch is a killing zone." "Not killing," Reynolds' voice returned over their radios. "If we wanted you dead, you would be. This is your last warning, Mr. Luna. Withdraw your forces, or we show you what we're really capable of." Luna grabbed a radio. "You think you've won. This is only our first wave. I have more men, more weapons, more targets," Reynolds interrupted. "Look around. Your professional soldiers are pinned down. Your military hardware is being defeated by superior tactics. Still think overwhelming force is the answer." Razor's coordinated movements had the cartel forces surrounded, trapped in killing zones of their own making. Reynolds' strategy wasn't just working, it was dismantling the cartel's entire tactical approach. "Final warning," Reynolds announced. "Surrender now or face the consequences." The morning sun revealed the true extent of the trap. Luna had brought an army to crush one man and his dog. Instead, they found themselves caught in one of the most sophisticated defensive operations in cartel history. And this was just the beginning. Trapped in the killing zone of Reynolds' mountain ranch, Salvador Luna watched his tactical advantage crumble. 4 more vehicles disabled, communications still jammed, and his professional soldiers pinned down by an invisible enemy. "Burn it," he ordered suddenly, his composure finally breaking. "Burn everything. If we can't have this ranch, no one will." Ramirez stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, we have men in those buildings." "I don't care," Luna screamed. "Show them what happens when you challenge Azteca." Underground in his command bunker, Reynolds monitored their communications through captured frequencies. Razor maintained his position in the tunnel network, coordinating defender movements with military precision. "They're getting desperate," Sophia observed from her station. "That makes them dangerous," Anna added. "No," Reynolds corrected, checking his tactical display. "Desperation makes them predictable. Watch." Above ground, cartel forces began deploying incendiary devices. They moved in textbook fashion, following standard military doctrine for urban warfare. "Just as planned," Reynolds told his defenders. Phase 4. Razor. Execute. The Belgian Malinois moved through his assigned sectors, his signals directing concealed teams with practiced efficiency. As the cartel forces approached their targets, hidden sprinkler systems activated throughout the property. "Water?" Luna screamed in frustration. "You think water will stop us?" "Not water," Ramirez realized too late. "Fire suppression foam, military grade. They've rigged the entire infrastructure." The cartel's incendiary weapons proved useless against Reynolds' preparations. Every attempt to burn the ranch was met with sophisticated countermeasures. "You're not the only one with military resources," Reynolds' voice came through their radios. "The difference is we're using ours to protect, not destroy." Razor's distinctive bark pattern signaled movement in the eastern sector. 3 cartel teams were attempting to flank through a narrow canyon. "Textbook tactics," Reynolds told Ortega. "They're following standard combat protocols. Spring the next trap." Hidden barriers emerged from the ground, cutting off the flanking maneuver. The cartel teams found themselves trapped in prepared kill zones, unable to advance or retreat. "This is impossible," one team leader shouted into his radio. "Every move we make, they're 2 steps ahead." Ramirez watched another tactical maneuver fail, his military experience telling him what they were facing. "This isn't just resistance," he told Luna. "This is a masterclass in defensive warfare." "Target their command center," Luna ordered, his rage building. "They have to be coordinating." "From somewhere." "Sir," Ramirez objected, "we're losing men. These aren't civilians we're fighting. This is a professionally prepared defense network." In the command bunker, Reynolds directed the next phase while Razor maintained his intelligence gathering. The dog's military training allowed him to coordinate multiple teams simultaneously, creating a fluid defense that seemed to anticipate every cartel move. "Western sector reporting," Ortega's voice came through. "They're moving their heavy weapons into position." "Right where we want them," Reynolds replied. "Agent Reyes, is your team ready?" "DEA tactical units in position," Sophia confirmed. "Border Patrol standing by." Above ground, the cartel forces attempted to establish firing positions with their remaining heavy weapons. They found every advantageous position already covered, every tactical spot already prepared. "Pull back," Ramirez ordered as another position became a trap. "They're using our own tactics against us." But Luna was beyond reason. "No retreat. Send in the demolition teams. Level every building if you have to." Razor's ears perked up at distant explosions. Through the camera network, Reynolds watched the cartel's demolition teams move forward. "Final phase," he commanded. "All units execute Mountain Lion protocol." The ranch seemed to transform. Hidden bunkers revealed themselves as hardened fighting positions. Concealed teams emerged from camouflaged locations, their coordinated movements showing months of preparation. "My God," Ramirez muttered, finally understanding. "The entire property is a fortress." Razor's warning signal came just as the demolition teams reached their targets. The buildings they intended to destroy were already reinforced, prepared for exactly this scenario. "You don't understand what you're really fighting, do you?" Reynolds' voice returned. "This isn't about one man or one dog. This is about showing cartels they can't take whatever they want." Luna grabbed a radio, his voice shaking with fury. "You think these preparations make you strong? I have an entire cartel. I can bring 10 times this force." "Look around you," Reynolds replied calmly. "Your professional soldiers are trapped. Your military hardware is useless. Your tactical advantage is gone. Still think numbers are the answer?" Razor coordinated the final encirclement. Teams moved with practiced precision, each group knowing their role in the larger strategy. "Sir," Ramirez reported, "we're completely surrounded. They've cut off every escape route." "Impossible," Luna raged. "We have superior numbers, superior firepower." "And it means nothing," Ramirez interrupted. "This isn't a battle, it's an execution. They're not trying to kill us. They're demonstrating that they can." Reynolds' voice returned. "Finally, someone understands. Last chance, Mr. Luna. Surrender your forces, or we show you what a truly motivated Marine and his combat dog are capable of." Underground, Anna watched the tactical display. "They're running out of options." "They never had options," Reynolds replied. "Everything they've done, every move they've made was planned for." Razor, final positions. The Belgian Malinois moved his teams into place. The cartel forces found themselves caught in the most sophisticated trap they'd ever encountered. "Sir," Ramirez tried one last time, "we have to surrender. We're fighting ghosts who know our every move before we make it." But Luna wasn't finished. "No," he snarled, "I have one last card to play, something not even your precious tactical genius could predict." Reynolds smiled grimly. "Razor, Protocol Echo." The dog's response was immediate, his coordinated movements triggering the final phase of Reynolds' defense strategy. "You see, Mr. Luna," Reynolds' voice came through one last time, "there's something you should know about fighting force recon. Marines, we don't plan for what you might do. We plan for everything you could possibly do." The morning sun revealed the true extent of Reynolds' ranch's transformation. What had looked like a vulnerable property had become an impregnable fortress, and the cartel was about to learn why some battles are lost before they even begin. The final confrontation was about to begin, but the outcome had been decided long ago in the careful planning, the meticulous preparation, and the unshakable determination of a Marine and his combat dog who refused to be intimidated. Luna's final gambit came in the form of 2 black helicopters appearing over the eastern ridge. Military-grade gunships with weapon systems clearly visible in the morning light. "Now what, Captain Reynolds?" Luna's voice crackled through the radio. "Your ground network won't help against air support." In the command bunker, Reynolds watched the approaching helicopters with calculated focus. Razor maintained his position, awaiting commands. "Sir," Ramirez warned, "those aren't supposed to be here. Using military aircraft will bring federal attention." "I don't care anymore," Luna shouted. "Level the entire ranch. Show them what real power looks like." Reynolds' voice came through their network. "Razor, Protocol Sierra." The Belgian Malinois immediately moved his teams into new positions, his training evident in every coordinated movement. "You still think you're in control, Luna? Watch your precious ranch burn from the sky," Luna taunted as the gunships began their attack run. Suddenly, the helicopters were bathed in spotlight beams as 3 Border Patrol Blackhawks emerged from the cloud cover above them. "This is U.S. Border Patrol Air Command," a voice boomed. "You are in violation of restricted airspace. Land immediately, or you will be shot down." Luna's face contorted with rage. "No! Open fire! Destroy everything!" The gunship pilots hesitated, caught between Luna's orders and the federal response teams. Their hesitation was all Reynolds needed. "All units execute," he commanded. Razor's signals coordinated the civilian teams perfectly as hidden surface-to-air missile launchers emerged from concealed positions around the ranch. "Those are military-grade air defense systems," Ramirez reported, his voice shaking. "Where did they get those?" "You're not the only ones with military connections," Reynolds' voice returned. "The difference is ours are legal. Border Patrol's been waiting for an excuse to catch your gunships in U.S. airspace." The Cartel helicopters found themselves in an impossible position. Border Patrol above, air defenses below, and federal witnesses recording everything. "Land your aircraft," the Border Patrol commander ordered. "This is your final warning." Underground, Sophia watched the tactical display. "Think they'll try something stupid?" "Count on it," Reynolds replied. "Luna won't accept defeat." Razor, mark the primary target. The Belgian Malinois moved silently through the tunnel network, positioning teams for what would come next. Above ground, the Cartel gunships made their choice. One turned to flee back toward Mexico, while the other, carrying Luna himself, dove toward the ranch. "If I burn, you burn!" Luna screamed over the radio. "Now," Reynolds commanded. Hidden panels throughout the property opened, revealing sophisticated electronic warfare equipment. The gunship's targeting systems went haywire, its weapons refusing to lock. "Electronic warfare suite," Reynolds explained to his defenders, "courtesy of our friends in federal law enforcement. Amazing what you can get when you're working with the right people." The gunship wavered, its pilots fighting suddenly unresponsive controls. Border Patrol helicopters moved to intercept, but Reynolds' voice stopped them. "Let them land," he ordered. Luna just made his final mistake. The Cartel leader's helicopter set down hard in the ranch's main clearing, its electronic systems completely scrambled. Luna emerged, firing wildly with an automatic weapon. "Come out and face me, Reynolds," he screamed. "No more tricks, no more traps." Razor's bark signaled movement in the eastern sector. Luna found himself completely surrounded, his remaining men being systematically disarmed by Reynolds' civilian defenders, their positions compromised by the dog's coordinated intelligence. "You still don't understand what you're really fighting, do you?" Reynolds' voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "This was never about one Marine against your cartel. This was about showing people they don't have to be afraid." Luna spun, trying to locate the source of the voice. His remaining men were being methodically contained, their positions compromised by Razor's coordinated intelligence gathering. "I have an army," Luna shouted. "I can bring 100 times this force." "Look around you," Reynolds replied calmly, emerging from a hidden position with Razor flanking him. "Your army is defeated. Your professional soldiers surrendered. Your military hardware failed. And you still haven't learned the most important lesson." "What lesson?" Luna snarled, his weapon swinging wildly. Reynolds moved with practiced efficiency, Razor at his side. That sometimes the strongest weapon isn't firepower or numbers. Sometimes it's showing people they can fight back. Luna raised his weapon, but it was already over. Razor moved with military precision, his coordinated takedown leaving the cartel leader disarmed and face down before he could fire. Impressive. And dog, Ramirez commented, as Anna's deputies moved to secure Luna. More than that, Reynolds corrected. He's a symbol of what happens when you train people to resist instead of teaching them to be afraid. Sophia arrived with federal tactical teams. Border Patrol caught the fleeing helicopter. We've got enough evidence to take down Azteca's entire weapons trafficking network. Throughout the ranch, civilian defenders emerged from their positions. Regular people who had found the courage to fight back, trained by a former Marine who understood that true strength comes from unity. "You've lost everything," Reynolds told Luna as he was led away. "Not because we outgunned you, but because you never understood what you were really fighting." "And what was that?" Luna spat. "A community that decided it was done being afraid." Reynolds turned to Razor. "Stand down, boy." The dog relaxed his combat posture, but maintained his vigilance. Their mission wasn't quite finished. "Hard to believe it worked," Anna commented, watching federal agents process captured cartel members. "It worked because everyone played their part," Reynolds replied. "The defenders, the community, even our federal friends." Miguel approached with news from the outlying areas. "Other ranchers are already asking for training. They want to learn how to protect themselves." "And they will," Reynolds assured him. "Azteca has just helped us prove something important, that when people stand together, even the most powerful cartels can fall." Razor maintained his position as the sun rose higher, his military training still evident in every movement. He wasn't just a war dog anymore. He was a symbol of resistance, proof that with the right training and unity, any community could defend itself. The battle for Reynolds' ranch was over, but its impact was just beginning. One Marine, his combat dog, and a determined community had changed the balance of power on the border. And somewhere in the distance, other cartels were about to learn a valuable lesson about underestimating old warriors and their faithful companions. The sun climbed high over the mountain ranch as federal agents processed the captured cartel members. Reynolds watched from his porch, Razor at his side, as the true scope of their victory became clear. "Final count," Sophia reported, joining them with fresh intel. 42 cartel operators captured, including Luna and Ramirez. 17 military-grade vehicles seized, 2 gunships impounded, and enough evidence to take down their entire weapons trafficking network. "The weapons?" Reynolds asked, his tactical mind already calculating implications. "They'll be traced, already happening. Serial numbers match shipments that disappeared from military bases. Luna's connection opens up an international investigation." Razor's ears perked up at approaching vehicles. More federal teams arriving. These ones specialized in evidence collection. "Your dog did more than help us win a battle," Sophia continued. "He helped expose corruption at the highest levels." "He just did what he was trained to do," Reynolds replied modestly. "The real victory belongs to the community." Anna arrived with Miguel and other local ranchers. The civilian defenders were helping federal agents secure the property, their training evident in their professional conduct. 4 more communities have reached out, Miguel announced. "They want to know how we did it, how we stood up to Azteca." "It's not just about tactical training," Reynolds explained, watching Razor maintain his vigilant patrol. "It's about teaching people they don't have to be afraid." Inside the command bunker, federal analysts were reviewing Reynolds' defense network. The sophistication of the operation had caught everyone's attention. "This is beyond anything we've seen," one analyst commented. The integration of civilian defenders with military tactics, the use of terrain, the psychological warfare aspects. That's because everyone's been thinking about it wrong. Reynolds told them. You can't fight cartels with just force. You have to change how communities see themselves. Razor suddenly alerted to movement at the perimeter. A group of ranchers from a neighboring county had arrived, seeking advice on protecting their own properties. It's already spreading, Anna observed. Other ranchers are realizing they don't have to live under cartel control. That's what Luna never understood, Reynolds replied. He thought he was fighting one Marine and his dog. He was really fighting an idea that ordinary people can learn to defend themselves. The underground network was being converted into a training facility. Reynolds' defensive innovations would become a model for other border communities. Border Patrol wants to establish a permanent presence, Sophia reported. Use your ranch as a forward operating base. Good, Reynolds nodded, but make sure they understand this stays community-led. We work with law enforcement, not for them. Razor demonstrated advanced detection techniques for the visiting ranchers. The dog's ability to coordinate civilian teams had become legendary overnight. It's not just about fighting, Reynolds explained to the observers. It's about intelligence gathering, coordination, community organization. The dogs are symbols of what's possible with the right training. Anna returned with news from Washington. Multiple agencies are interested in your training program. They want to establish similar networks in other border regions. They're missing the point, Reynolds replied. You can't impose this from outside. It has to come from the community itself. Throughout the property, cleanup operations continued. The civilian defenders were helping restore the ranch, their shared victory strengthening community bonds. Ramirez wants to talk, Sophia announced. Says he has information about other cartel operations. Of course he does, Reynolds smiled. He's a professional. He knows which way the wind is blowing. The captured cartel lieutenant had watched the entire operation unfold. His military experience helped him understand just how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. I've never seen anything like it, Ramirez told federal investigators. They didn't just beat us tactically, they changed the entire dynamic of border security. Razor continued his patrols, but his role was evolving. He wasn't just a combat asset anymore. He was a teaching tool, showing other communities how to train their own dogs. 7 more ranches requesting assistance, Miguel reported, words spreading fast. Start with the basics, Reynolds instructed. Security assessments, community organization, basic training. Razor will help evaluate their potential. The dog's reputation had grown beyond his military achievements. He represented something new, the possibility of effective civilian resistance against cartel power. Azteca isn't the only cartel that will try to move in, Sophia warned. No, Reynolds agreed, but they're the last ones who'll try it here. And soon, they'll be the last ones to try it anywhere along this stretch of border. The command bunker was being converted into a training center. Reynolds's defensive innovations would be taught to other communities, adapted to their specific needs and territories. It's more than just tactical training, he explained to community leaders. It's about building networks, sharing intelligence, coordinating responses. The dogs are just part of a larger strategy. Razor demonstrated coordination techniques, showing how civilian teams could work together effectively. His military training had been adapted into something communities could use. The cartels rely on fear and isolation, Reynolds continued. We break that by building connections, teaching communities to support each other. Sophia returned with more news. Federal agencies are already seeing changes. Other cartels are pulling back, reassessing their border strategies. They're learning, Reynolds nodded. But so are we. Every community that stands up makes it harder for them to operate. The sun began to set over the mountain ranch, but its transformation was just beginning. Reynolds watched as Razor trained with new civilian teams, his experience helping forge ordinary people into effective defenders. This is just the start, he told Anna and Sophia. Azteca gave us something valuable. Proof that communities can fight back, that ordinary people can learn to defend themselves. The Belgian Malinois maintained his vigilance, but his posture was different now. He wasn't just a combat asset or even a law enforcement tool. He was a teacher, showing others what was possible. The cartels will adapt, Sophia cautioned. Let them, Reynolds replied confidently, because now we know something they don't, that their greatest weakness isn't their tactics or their weapons. It's their belief that fear and violence are the only ways to control territory. The mountain ranch had become more than just a property that resisted a cartel. It had become a symbol of what was possible when communities decided to stand together. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, other cartels were about to learn a harsh lesson about the true meaning of territorial control. 2 weeks after the battle at Reynolds Ranch, he stood before a gathering of representatives from 15 border communities. Reza flanked him at attention, their presence a living testament to what proper training could achieve. The afternoon sun filtered through the converted command bunker's reinforced windows, illuminating the determined faces of ranchers, farmers, and townspeople who had lived too long under cartel shadow. The cartels rely on isolation, Reynolds explained, pointing to a map marked with cartel territories. They want each community to feel alone, helpless. That stops today. He gestured to the sophisticated defense network diagrams spread across the tactical tables. Sophia entered with fresh intelligence reports. 4 more cartels have pulled back from their border operations. The Azteca defeat is sending shockwaves through their entire network. Good, Reynolds nodded. But that's just the beginning. Reza demonstrate. The Belgian Malinois moved with practiced precision, showing the gathered observers how civilian teams could coordinate effectively. His military training had been adapted into something communities could replicate. Notice how he moves, Reynolds pointed out. It's not about aggression or violence, it's about coordination, communication, and control of territory. Every community has natural defensive advantages. We just need to learn how to use them. Miguel arrived with news from the first wave of training. 5 communities have established their basic defense networks. Local dogs being trained as we speak. The ranchers are already reporting cartel scouts avoiding their properties. The dogs are just part of it, Reynolds reminded them. The real power's in the community networks we're building. Reza, next phase. The Belgian Malinois demonstrated advanced coordination techniques, showing how multiple teams could work together across different sectors. Azteca made a critical mistake, Reynolds continued, studying the tactical displays. They thought defeating one ranch would break everyone's spirit. Instead, they showed us all what's possible when people stand together. Anna brought updates from law enforcement. Federal agencies are reporting major disruptions in cartel operations. They're having trouble moving product through trained communities because they can't use their usual tactics. Because they're used to operating in shadows, Reynolds explained, watching Reza work with civilian teams. Hard to do that when every community knows how to shine a light on their activities. Show them, boy. Reza coordinated a complex demonstration, showing how civilian defenders could control territory without direct confrontation. The dog's military precision had been translated into something sustainable, something communities could maintain long-term. Your communities aren't just learning to defend themselves, Reynolds told the gathered leaders. You're learning to work together, share intelligence, support each other. Every successful defense makes the next community stronger. Sophia returned. With more intelligence, 3 more cartels have approached federal agencies about surrender terms. They're saying the border is becoming too difficult to control. That's because they're fighting the wrong battle, Reynolds replied, watching Reza train with civilian teams. They're still thinking in terms of force and fear. We're building something different. The training center had evolved rapidly. What started as a defensive bunker had become a sophisticated facility for community defense training. Each room showcased different aspects of the program, from basic security to advanced coordination. Each town adapts the training to their needs, Reynolds explained as they toured the facility. Different terrain, different threats, different resources, but the principles remain the same. He demonstrated with tactical displays, showing how various communities had modified the basic defense network for their specific situations. Razor alerted to approaching vehicles. More community representatives arriving for training. The dog coordinated with the security teams, demonstrating the seamless integration they'd developed. It's spreading faster than we expected, Anna observed. Because people are ready, Reynolds replied. They've been waiting for proof that resistance is possible. Azteca gave us that proof. The command center displayed a map of the border region, showing the growing network of trained communities. Each point of light represented a town that had learned to stand against cartel control. The transformation was spreading like wildfire. This is more than just defense training, Reynolds told the assembled leaders. We're building a new kind of border security, one based on community strength rather than just force. Razor worked with local dogs, showing how basic herding and guard dog instincts could be developed into sophisticated security assets. Every community has resources they don't realize, Reynolds explained. We're just showing them how to use what they already have. Anna arrived with reports from the field. 3 more cartel operations shut down. The communities didn't even need direct intervention. Just the threat of organized resistance was enough. Because cartels rely on easy victories, Reynolds nodded. They're not equipped to fight communities that know how to defend themselves. The training program had expanded beyond just tactical defense. Communities were learning intelligence gathering, coordination, and strategic planning. The sophistication of the network grew daily. This isn't just about stopping cartels, Reynolds told the gathered leaders. It's about building something that lasts, something they can't break through force or fear. Razor demonstrated advanced patrol techniques, showing how communities could maintain security without militarizing their towns. The dogs aren't just security assets, Reynolds explained. They're teachers, showing us how to work together effectively. Sophia brought news from Washington. Multiple agencies want to study your program. They're calling it a revolution in community-based security. They're missing the point, Reynolds replied. This isn't about creating a new security system. It's about showing people they've had the power all along. The sun set over the mountain ranch as another day of training concluded. Community representatives departed with new knowledge, new confidence, and new connections to their neighbors. The network grew stronger with each passing day. It's working better than we hoped, Anna observed, watching the last vehicles leave. Because it's not just about training, Reynolds explained, watching Razor conduct his evening patrol. It's about changing how people see themselves and their communities. The Belgian Malinois had become more than just a symbol of resistance. He was proof that with proper training and coordination, ordinary communities could stand against seemingly overwhelming forces. The cartels will try to adapt, Sophia warned, reviewing the latest intelligence reports. Let them, Reynolds smiled. Because every adaptation, every new tactic they try, just shows more communities that resistance is possible. As night fell, Reynolds watched Razor working with the next group of community dogs. Their legacy would live on through every town that learned to stand together, every community that refused to be controlled by fear. This is just the beginning, he told his gathered students. The cartels thought they could rule through fear and isolation. Instead, they've taught us all the most important lesson, that true strength comes from unity, not force. The border was changing, one community at a time. And somewhere in the darkness, other cartels were learning a harsh lesson about the true nature of power. that some territories can't be controlled through violence, and some communities won't be ruled by fear. The transformation had begun, and there was no going back. Reynolds and Razor had shown the way, but it was the communities themselves that would ensure the change lasted. Each trained dog, each coordinated defense, each successful resistance added another link in an unbreakable chain of security that no cartel could overcome. 1 month after the training program began, the first major test of the new community defense network came in the form of a cartel probe against Sierra Vista, one of the newly trained communities 30 miles south of Reynolds Ranch. The attack came exactly as predicted, a coordinated assault aimed at establishing a foothold in supposedly vulnerable territory. They hit exactly like you projected, Sierra Vista's mayor reported to Reynolds as they reviewed the after-action footage. 3 in the morning trying to establish a forward operating base, but we were ready. The cartel's attempted incursion had been repelled without a single shot fired. Reynolds studied the reports while Razor worked with Sierra Vista's newly trained defense dogs. The cartel's operation had followed predictable patterns, and the community's defensive network had performed flawlessly. Your perimeter detection worked perfectly, Reynolds noted. The dogs detected their approach, civilian teams maintained coordination, and the cartel found no weak points to exploit. Sophia arrived with intelligence updates, her expression reflecting growing satisfaction. Similar reports from 5 other communities in the past week. Different cartels, same result. They probe, find organized resistance and withdraw without engaging, because their whole operational model is based on finding easy targets, Reynolds explained, pointing to the tactical displays. Show them coordination and preparation and they look elsewhere. The psychology of predators hasn't changed since our tracking days, has it, boy? Razor's ears twitched in acknowledgement as he demonstrated advanced detection techniques with the local dogs. The command center displayed a map showing cartel activity across the region. The difference was striking. Trained communities stood out as clear gaps in cartel control, creating an expanding network of secure territories. Los Diablos tried to move into Thompson Creek yesterday, Miguel reported, entering with fresh intelligence. Found themselves facing 3 coordinated communities instead of one isolated target. Show me, Reynolds requested. Shadow and Razor moved to the tactical display, their presence a reminder of how the whole system began. The report detailed how Thompson Creek, Sierra Vista and Red Valley had coordinated their response. Cartel scouts found every approach watched, every route monitored, every potential weakness covered by overlapping security. They didn't even attempt a full incursion, Miguel continued, pride evident in his voice. Just turned around and left, words spreading fast. These communities aren't worth the trouble anymore. Sophia brought more intelligence updates from federal sources. Agencies are reporting major shifts in cartel behavior. They're actively avoiding areas with trained communities, even rerouting established smuggling paths to stay clear. Because their tactical advantage is gone, Reynolds explained, watching Razor work with a group of local dogs. They rely on communities being isolated and afraid. That's not the case anymore. The cartels made a fundamental mistake in their strategy. 6 more communities requesting basic training, Anna reported, entering with a stack of requests. And 3 already. Trained towns asking for advanced coordination techniques. Reynolds watched as Razor worked with another group of local dogs, showing how basic herding instincts could be developed into sophisticated security assets. The transformation in the animals was remarkable, from simple farm dogs to coordinated security teams. The cartels made a fundamental error, he told the gathered community leaders. They thought fear was their greatest weapon. Instead, they taught us all how to be fearless, show them why. Reports continued to arrive from across the border region. Communities that had completed the training program were not only defending themselves, but actively helping their neighbors establish similar systems. The network effect was exponential. It's like watching a wall being built, Sophia observed, studying the updated security maps. But not of concrete and steel, of coordinated communities that can't be intimidated. Better than a wall, Reynolds corrected, watching Razor demonstrate advanced coordination techniques with newly trained teams. We're building a network that adapts and grows stronger with each challenge. Walls can be climbed or tunneled under, but you can't tunnel under community resolve. Santa Rosa reported another withdrawal, Anna announced, reviewing the morning's reports. Cartel elements tried to establish a presence, found themselves facing organized resistance, and pulled back without a fight. Because violence is expensive, Reynolds explained, studying the tactical displays. The cartels can't afford prolonged confrontations with prepared communities. It's bad for business, and their business model depends on quick victories over isolated targets. The training center had evolved to handle multiple communities simultaneously. Different groups learned different aspects of the program: detection, coordination, communication, and response. Each element built on the others, creating a comprehensive defense network. The dogs are the key, Reynolds told a new group of community leaders watching Razor work with their local animals, not just for security, but for teaching people how to work together effectively. They're the visible symbol of what's possible. Sophia brought news from federal agencies studying the program. They're calling it the Reynolds model. Other border regions are requesting information about your training protocols. As long as they understand the fundamentals, Reynolds replied, his expression serious. This isn't about creating military units or turning communities into armed camps. It's about teaching people to stand together, to support each other, to refuse to be intimidated. Razor worked with a group of ranchers' dogs, showing how their natural protective instincts could be channeled into effective security measures. The results were impressive. Even previously untrained dogs quickly learned to work together, coordinating their efforts across wide areas. 4 more cartel operations shut down this week, Anna reported, reviewing the latest intelligence. Not from law enforcement action, from lack of operational space. They simply can't move freely anymore. Because they're used to operating in shadows, Reynolds nodded, watching Razor coordinate a multi-team exercise. Hard to do that when every community knows how to shine a light on their activities. The success was evident in more than just statistics. Communities that had lived in fear for years were transforming, reclaiming their territories and their dignity. The Azteca defeat wasn't just a tactical victory, Reynolds told his students watching the training exercises. It was proof that the cartel's power is based on an illusion, the illusion that they can't be resisted. Once that illusion breaks, their whole system starts to crumble. As evening approached, Reynolds watched Razor working with the next generation of security dogs. Their legacy would continue through every community that learned to stand strong, every town that refused to live in fear. The cartels will keep trying, Sophia cautioned, reviewing the latest threat assessments. Of course they will, Reynolds agreed, watching the training sessions. But each failure just makes our network stronger. Every community that successfully resists becomes proof that others can do the same. The border region was changing, not through force or government action, but through communities learning to protect themselves and each other. It wasn't just about security anymore. It was about restoring hope, dignity, and self-determination to people who had lived too long under the shadow of fear. This is how real change happens, Reynolds told the gathered leaders, watching their dogs work with Razor. Not from outside force, but from communities discovering their own strength. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, other cartels were learning that some territories couldn't be taken by force or fear, because courage, once awakened, spreads faster than terror ever could. The transformation was unstoppable now, built on the unshakable foundation of communities that had learned to stand together and dogs that had shown them how. 2 months after the battle that transformed the border landscape, Reynolds stood on a hilltop overlooking the changing region. Razor sat alert beside him, watching the sunset paint the mountains in familiar golden hues. The transformation below them was evident. Where Cartel lookouts once watched from hidden positions, community patrol dogs now kept peaceful watch. Final confirmation from federal intelligence, Sophia reported, joining them with fresh files. The last major cartel operation in our sector has withdrawn completely. They're calling it the Reynolds effect. Cartels actively avoiding areas with trained communities. Below them, the evening patrol teams from 3 different communities coordinated their movements, their dogs working in perfect sync, a direct result of Razor's training program. It's more than just security now, Reynolds observed, watching the coordinated patrols. Look at how they move, how they work together. These aren't scared people hiding behind walls anymore. These are communities that know their strength. Anna arrived with the latest statistics, her expression reflecting quiet triumph. Cartel activity down 95% across trained territories. Drug trafficking routes completely disrupted. Even human trafficking operations are avoiding our communities entirely. Because they can't operate in the open anymore, Reynolds explained, watching Razor guide a training exercise with new community dogs. Every community is now a hardened target, and they're all connected. The cartels can't find soft spots to exploit. The command center had evolved into a sophisticated coordination hub. Representatives from 25 different communities work together, sharing intelligence and coordinating responses across a growing secure territory. Sierra Vista intercepted another probe attempt last night, Miguel reported, pointing to the tactical display. Cartel scouts found every approach monitored, every route covered. They didn't even try to push through. Show them why, Reynolds instructed. Razor moved to demonstrate with the local dogs, showing how their coordinated patrol patterns had created an impenetrable defense network that covered miles of territory. 3 more communities completed advanced training this week, Anna added, reviewing the expansion reports. The network's getting stronger every day, and the effects are spreading beyond our immediate area. Sophia brought satellite images showing the changed landscape. Federal agencies are amazed. Entire cartel territories are just empty now. They can't maintain control when every community knows how to resist and is connected to others doing the same. Razor alerted to movement, another training group arriving from a neighboring state. The Belgian Malinois' military background had been transformed into something that could be taught and replicated across vast territories. The cartels made a critical miscalculation, Reynolds told the gathered leaders. They thought attacking my ranch would break the region's spirit. Instead, they showed everyone that resistance was possible, that communities could stand together and win. The training center buzzed with activity as multiple communities worked on different aspects of the program. Razor demonstrated advanced coordination techniques, while new security teams practiced integrated responses. It's not just about defense anymore, Anna observed, watching the exercises. These communities are actively reclaiming territory. The cartels can't find anywhere to operate because every area is covered by overlapping community networks. Because they never understood what they were really fighting, Reynolds replied, studying the tactical displays. They thought fear was their greatest weapon. Instead, it became their greatest weakness, creating the very unity they tried to prevent. Reports continued to arrive from across the sector. Communities that had lived under cartel control for years were now standing tall, their coordinated defense networks making criminal operations impossible to maintain. Los Zetas tried to establish A new route yesterday, Sophia reported, marking the latest attempt on the map. Found themselves facing 5 coordinated communities instead of isolated targets. They withdrew within hours of arriving. Of course they did, Reynolds nodded, watching Razor work with the next generation of security dogs. Their whole operational model depends on finding weak points. There aren't any weak points left in connected communities. Federal agencies wanted to expand the program to other sectors, calling it a revolution in border security. As long as they understand the fundamental truth, Reynolds cautioned. This isn't about creating a new security force, it's about teaching communities their own strength. The evening patrol teams demonstrated their coordination, moving seamlessly between territories. What started as basic security had evolved into a sophisticated network of community protection that stretched for hundreds of miles. 4 more cartel lieutenants surrendered this week, Sophia reported. They're saying it's impossible to maintain operations here anymore. The territory is too hostile. Not hostile, Reynolds corrected, watching the patrols work. United. Show them why. Razor led a complex training exercise, demonstrating how multiple communities could work together seamlessly. His military training had been adapted into something sustainable and reproducible. The transformation is permanent, Anna observed. Even if the cartels tried to return in force, they'd fail. The communities know how to work together now, how to support each other. Because we're not just defending territories anymore, Reynolds finished, watching the patrol teams coordinate their handoffs. We're defending homes, families, communities that know how to stand together. That's something no cartel can defeat. Victoria brought final confirmation from federal agencies. It's official. Our sector is being declared cartel-free. First time in decades. Because the cartels finally learned the truth, Reynolds replied, watching Razor work with his students. Some territories can't be taken by force. Some people won't be ruled by fear. Some communities, once they learn to stand together, can never be broken apart. The border region had transformed from a cartel battleground into a network of strong, coordinated communities. What started with one Marine and his combat dog had become something the cartels couldn't break, a chain of communities that knew their own strength. This is just the beginning, Reynolds told his students, watching. The next generation of patrol dogs train. Every community that stands strong becomes proof that others can do the same. That's how real change happens. One community at a time, one connection at a time. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, other cartels were learning the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the strongest territories aren't the ones with the most weapons, but the ones where people have learned to stand together, unafraid and united in their determination to live free from fear. The sun set over the transformed borderlands, but the light of hope it represented would never fade. Reynolds and Razor had shown the way, but it was the communities themselves that would ensure the change lasted, creating a new model of security based not on walls or weapons, but on the unshakable strength of people standing together, protecting each other, and refusing to be intimidated by those who ruled through fear. The transformation was complete, and the lessons learned would spread far beyond these mountains, showing others that the greatest power lies not in violence or terror, but in the courage of communities that stand together, united and unafraid. The border region had transformed into an unrecognizable landscape 6 months after Azteca's fatal mistake. Reynolds stood on his porch at sunrise, just as he had that fateful morning. Razor sat beside him, their posture relaxed but vigilant, old habits dying hard. Final confirmation from intelligence, Sophia reported, joining them. The last cartel operation in the entire region has shut down. Not from raids or arrests. They simply can't operate here anymore. Below them, morning patrols from 3 different communities coordinated their movements, their dogs working in perfect sync, a living legacy of Razor's training program. What started as one Marine's defense had become a model of regional cooperation. Remember what Luna said? Anna asked. That he had an entire cartel, that he could bring overwhelming force. He never understood what he was really fighting, Reynolds replied, as Razor demonstrated advanced coordination techniques. He thought power came from fear. We showed everyone it comes from unity. The morning sun revealed the transformed landscape. Where cartel lookouts once watched from hilltops, community patrol dogs now kept peaceful watch. The border region had changed not through force, but through courage. Latest numbers are in, Sophia reported. 6 months without a single successful cartel operation. No new trafficking routes, no territory incursions. Even the smugglers are avoiding our communities. Because we changed the game, Reynolds nodded. Show them how it works now. Razor led his teams through a complex demonstration, the dogs moving with military precision. But their purpose had evolved from combat to protection, from war to peace. The transformation is complete, Anna noted. Federal agencies are implementing the Reynolds model across the entire border. Other countries are requesting training programs. Reynolds watched as the next class of community dogs worked with their handlers. As long as they remember the fundamental truth, this isn't about creating better security forces. It's about teaching communities to stand together. The training facility had become more than just a school for defense. It was a symbol of what communities could achieve when they refused to be ruled by fear. 4 more cartels officially dissolved this week, Sophia announced. Their own documents say it's pointless to operate here now. The territory is too hostile. Not hostile, Reynolds corrected. United, that's what they never understood. Razor coordinated with the patrol teams, demonstrating how military training could be adapted for community protection. Their legacy would live on through every dog and handler they trained. Remember when the cartels thought they could isolate communities? Anna asked. Now look at them, working together, supporting each other, stronger than any cartel could ever be. Because we showed them something more powerful than fear, Reynolds replied. We showed them hope. The morning patrols demonstrated the new reality. Communities that once lived in terror now moved with confidence. Territories that cartels once ruled through violence were now protected through cooperation. It's not just about security anymore, Sophia observed. These communities are thriving. Families returning, businesses reopening, life returning to places. The cartels had turned into ghost towns because we remembered something they wanted us to forget, Reynolds said, watching Razor work with his students. That true strength doesn't come from weapons or walls. It comes from people standing together. The command center displayed the final transformation. Where cartel territories once dominated the map, now a network of protected communities stretched across the region, each supporting the others, each one proof that resistance was possible. The cartels will keep trying, Anna cautioned. Let them, Reynolds smiled, because every failed attempt just proves what we've been teaching, that some things can't be taken by force, some spirits can't be broken by fear. Razor sat alert, watching the sunrise paint the desert gold. They weren't just military dogs anymore, or even just faithful companions. They had become symbols of something larger, proof that courage, once awakened, spreads faster than fear ever could. This is your legacy, boy, Reynolds told him softly. Not just teaching communities to defend themselves, but showing them they never had to be afraid in the first place. The morning breeze carried the sounds of life returning to the border region. Children playing where cartel lookouts once stood, families walking where smugglers once crept, communities thriving where fear once ruled. The cartels had made a fatal mistake. They thought stealing Reynolds' horses would break the region's spirit. Instead, they gave him the key to breaking their power forever. And somewhere in the morning light, cartels across the region were learning the final, unshakable truth: that some territories can never be conquered, some spirits can never be broken, and some communities, once they learn to stand together, can never be ruled by fear again. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot to us.